Hey there, it is time for some real talk. We're keeping it real here on Steve Shetler Media. Real Talk with Aaron and Steve, brought to us by New Life Community Church in Wellman, Iowa. And beside me, we have Aaron M. Fleming, author, pastor, overall good man, a good guy, a good man.
Well, thanks, Steve. I didn't come here today to be complimented, but I don't mind it at all. You're not so bad yourself.
Oh, well, thank you.
We're sitting here in the studio, and we always have some good conversation off the air. But now we're on the air, and we're ready to go with a topic that is of vital interest.
Yes.
Or maybe you'll just think we're crazy.
I mean, I think we're crazy half the time, but...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if the shoe fits, wear it, as
All right.
they say.
I'm wearing both of them.
We're wearing both of the shoes today. Here is our vital question
Let's
for
do
the
it.
day. Steve, question.
Okay.
Are demons real?
Are demons real? Wow.
I
That's
just-
a loaded question.
Just pushed Steve off the diving board into the deep end. Are demons real?
So are you talking like in a spiritual sense, in an actual physical form, all of the above? What are we talking?
Oh no, I didn't expect you to ask me a question. Well, so some people out there are just going to think we're nuts for even asking the question right off the bat. If there is no God, then there's probably no demons either. So if you're coming from that perspective, then Steve and I are already loony. But we read the Bible, and we're like, okay, God, I kind of get that, creator of the universe. That sort of explains where the universe came from. So I'm on board with that. Jesus, on board with Jesus. I enjoy being saved and that kind of stuff. But then we read stories about Jesus casting demons out of people. And we go, does that still happen?
Are you asking me? Awkward silence.
Well, I came prepared to talk about the question. So
Okay.
the short answer is yes, I
was
believe
gonna say-
demons are real.
Yeah, if you are asking me if that still happens, yes, I agree that it still happens.
It still happens. And, here, I want to just little plug for New Life Church up in Wellman. I opened this topic just last Sunday.
Okay.
Which by the time this airs will be 2 Sundays ago.
Yeah.
But open this topic for our people because we've been preaching through the book of Luke. And one of the things I enjoy about preaching through a book of the Bible is it makes it hard to avoid stuff, controversial stuff. I'll never forget the week that I was this was a number of years ago. I was preaching through the book of Mark, and I hit chapter 10, and the first story in that chapter was about people asking Jesus about divorce.
Okay. Yeah, that's a tough one
That's a tough one.
in this day and age, especially.
And at that time, we had 3 or 4 people who had just come into the church who had divorce in their background. That's part of their life story. And that's part of the life story of many, many Americans today. And I wanted to dodge that so badly.
Oh yeah.
I'm not fond of confrontation.
I'm right there with you. People pleaser, right here.
Woo! People pleasers for the win. We might not be right, but at least we're pleasing. No, so long story short, I prayed and I studied the scriptures and I brought a word that I felt was both gentle and humble and aligned with the word of God. And all of the people that I was afraid of offending came up to me and said, that was a really good and important message. So that's why I try to preach through one of the Gospels each year. I've done that, I think, 16 out of 17 years. I'm not sure what happened. We missed a year somewhere. It was probably COVID.
Yeah, COVID.
blame everything on COVID. So we get to this story in the book of Luke, and actually there's a series of chapters in the Gospel of Luke where there's a story about Jesus or his disciples casting demons out of people in every chapter for like 3 or 4 or 5 chapters in a row. So it's unavoidable. And even though I live in a scientific age where, like, we're all pretty skeptical, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Demons, like, was that just an ancient way of talking about mental illness? Like, they didn't know what mental illness was, and so they just attributed it to dark powers or whatever. So we ask those kinds of questions because we're so used to seeing the world in terms of science and what we can materially put our hands on or see under a microscope or something. But here's your story. This is a crazy one. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want from me, Jesus, Son of Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the evil spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places.
Yeah.
So there we go. I took our people and we flipped over to the book of Mark, where the same story is told with just a couple of added details, that this man lived among the tombs and spent his time howling and cutting himself with stones.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, it's crazy to think of and just to think about. I mean, it sounds like something out of a movie.
It does. It sounds. And then I asked our people, like, how many of you have seen the movie The Exorcist? And when you're in church, nobody wants to admit that they've seen The Exorcist, right? So like 3 people kind of put their hand up a little bit. I have seen The Exorcist. Have you seen The Exorcist?
I have not. I've seen bits and pieces over the years, but I don't watch. I'm not saying I'm some goody two shoes by any means, but I don't watch those types of movies. If it's demons or has to do with like demon type stuff, count me out.
Well, I watched it once long ago. I think I was maybe 20 years old, and it was creepy, and I don't need to see it again. But I will say this. Those were the worst exorcists in the world. I mean, for one thing, the one guy is losing his faith and becoming an atheist, and I just want to...
He's not the guy to do the job.
No, not the man for the job of exorcism. So we'll come back to that in a little bit, I think. But I asked our people, and I just want to put this out to our listening audience, because Steve, your first question when I said, do you believe that demons exist? We go straight to even like physical demons, physical manifestations, people throwing up, their heads twisting around. Like we think of those scenes from The Exorcist.
Yeah.
Or some other movies that we've seen. I'm trying to think of, there's another one that I saw about the end of the world, starring James Franco, and it was not a Christian film.
You didn't see it on whatever. Yeah, I'm trying. They have a streaming app.
It was not Left Behind. We'll put it that way.
Okay.
It actually was fascinatingly close to the truth in some important ways,
Okay.
but also really raunchy and wrong. But we see in movies, we see like kind of these dramatic manifestations, and is that what Jesus is talking about? And let's just put a pause on that and think about this story and ask our listening audience to be real with us. You can send us a personal message if you're dealing with tough stuff, or say something in the comments so other people know that you're experiencing something. But just stop and think about this. Think about this man. And this guy, I think, is the most extreme case of any demon-possessed person that we see in the Bible. This is
Legion.
dramatic, But stop and think. Do you know anybody who is driven to lonely places? Like they just when they need help, when they need fellowship, when they need community the most, it seems like they're driven into isolation. Do you know anybody who runs around naked? Like, probably not. But I asked another friend. I was kind of joking about it. I was like, "Do you know anybody that runs around naked?" And he was like, "Well, have you ever heard of Snapchat?" There's a lot of people sending naked pictures all over the place.
Yeah.
So that's real. Do you know anybody who is obsessed with skeletons, graveyards, death, and they always seem to be depressed, but they're always obsessed with kind of those death sorts of things. Do you know anybody with so much inner turmoil that they cut themselves or have thoughts of suicide? Well, if you think about it in that way, yeah, these problems are alive and well among us.
Mm-hmm.
The one other thing, I've always thought about these chains. The townspeople in this story put this guy in chains. I've always taken that to mean that they wanted to help him. Like they didn't want him running around in the tombs, cutting himself and howling. Yeah. Probably they were afraid of him, for one thing, but they also wanted to help him. And that was all that they had that they knew how to do to keep this guy from hurting himself. So today, in our day and age, do we know anybody who has just been locked up by society? Or do you know anybody who has been using medication, whether legal or illegal medication? Because there's some illegal medicine. Not really medicine, pharmaceuticals, street pharmaceuticals, floating around in our society today. I mean, there's probably no meth or pot use here in Sigourney.
No, none at all.
I mean, just like there's none up in Wellman.
Sigourney is clean, yes.
Iowa is a nice, clean state. No, we're fooling ourselves.
Yeah.
Even in our nice rural Midwestern towns that look like they come out of a Norman Rockwell painting, there's a lot of people in deep distress for whom medication, whether prescribed by a doctor or prescribed by Ray down the street, and those medications aren't even bringing relief to that person. I want to suggest that those things aren't necessarily a sign that someone's possessed by a demon, right? But there are demonic forces at work in our world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was a fun show, wasn't it?
I'll add to it. So you remember my band Piercing the Darkness?
Yes. I was going to ask you about that.
I was in a Christian rock worship band for several years called Piercing the Darkness. We actually got our name from a book where if you want to read an interesting book by an interesting author, Piercing the Darkness is actually the second book in I don't know if it's I think it's just a 2-part series. But yeah, it talks a lot about demons and actually manifesting themselves in a physical manner. So check out Piercing the Darkness if you want a good book. I was also going to refer to a song by a popular Christian band, Casting Crowns. They have a song about Legion, and it's called Set Me Free. So if you want to look that up and just kind of get maybe a Casting Crowns depiction of what that looked like, check that out as well.
Yeah. The book Piercing the Darkness is by Frank Peretti, right?
Yes.
He's really a very good writer of Christian themed suspense action kind of books. I've read a number of his. They're really quite good. So check those out. So what we'll wrap up with today is these are serious and real problems, and I'm sure that every single one of you listening could identify, whether in yourself or someone you know, some, if not all, of those manifestations of spiritual and emotional distress and bondage. And so this is serious stuff. The cool thing about the story, I didn't get to the part where Jesus cast the demons out of the guy. So that's good. The story is there not just to be like, oh, the world's so terrible, there's demons everywhere. Oh, the story is in the Bible because Jesus wins. So we'll come back next week and we'll talk a little bit more about what it looks like to be influenced by demonic forces. Not saying y'all out there are demon possessed, but we want to be able to figure out what's going on in my life. Am I being influenced by God, or am I being kind of pulled in another direction by something darker? And how can I get free from that? So we'll be back next week with Real Talk.
All right. And it's always brought to us by our friends and our pastor at the New Life Community Church in Wellman, Iowa. Make sure you check them out. I know we provide a link for their Facebook page here on Facebook, at least. So check them out. Check them out in person and check them out online. We thank New Life Community Church in Wellman for sponsoring Real Talk with Aaron and Steve. We'll be back with you next week.